Yo, 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 what is going on, RoK Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today we are going to be touching on something that I think is really important that players, and even though this might be more geared towards management in a kingdom, it is important that players understand why these things are being done, so that way you can not only have a little bit more hopeful appreciation for why these are being done, but help out and contribute in as many ways as possible. The topic today is going to be touching on the need to invest early in your kingdom by establishing shells. Why is it that you need to have a bunch of shells? Why do you even set up shells early in a kingdom? That's what we're going to be discussing, obviously talking about some of the benefits of it as well, and just doing a little bit of a deep dive into there. So as always, if you enjoyed the content, make sure you sub, like, ring the notification bell, and of course, if you want to join and be a part of our conversation, hit up the Discord. You can find a link to that in the pinned comment description right down below. Alrighty. So, wish I had some water. One moment. Ooh, here we go. Chill mode. Feeling good after that refresh. Okay. So, a shell, in short, refers to a alliance. Right? You just call it a shell because a shell is essentially an empty thing that you have that you fill up, right? An empty canvas or an empty... I'm just going to go with that. And so you'll often hear this term used in RoK depending on the kingdom you're playing in and, you know, if they use that verbiage or not. And the idea is that you are establishing shells early on. You might know these, such as farm alliances, academy alliances. Sometimes they'll refer to them even as shell alliances, pun intended. And from that, it is really just you creating a new alliance or another new alliance and then building it up, right? That means you are developing the tech. You are increasing, and let me just give some examples, why not? So that would be me, and again, I'll just join any alliance. Hey, it's my boy, Houston. So I'll go in here, right? And this is you developing the tech, whether it's development, territory, war, the alliance skills themselves that you can use. Maybe you're helping improve the storehouse in here by using your farm or using an alt, or which is pretty much more or less the same thing, same difference. Or maybe you're using any, right? But typically this is additional or alternative accounts, and you're playing them even if you're just logging in them one day just to gather or really just to do the bare minimum, right? You are doing anything and everything you can to help develop primarily the technology, and then of course as much as you can do in the storehouse as well for regular RSS and credits, in order so that way these alliance shells can be used for some beneficial purposes. This is why it really takes a kingdom effort. It's not just one person or a few people in management doing it. No, it really takes as many people as possible, because the more active players that you have in the kingdom, even if they're just putting in the bare minimum to help develop these alliance shells, means that they can develop that much faster, right? Compared to if you have a few people that are putting in a lot of work, you have a lot of people putting in a little bit of work, and that's going to help them progress and get to a usable point sooner rather than later. Now, the reason why you would develop shells early, and I'm talking day one, right? A strategy is where however many alliances you have, if you're going in as a project or even if you're just going in as one alliance, you should always be making at least one other alliance shell, right? So whatever you have, if you have one main alliance, you always make two, right? If you have two alliances, then you always make two more for four. You want to have your main alliance, and then you want to have a farm shell alliance that you use. Now, let's say you're a bigger group going into a kingdom, and you have, let's just say, 6 alliances going in. You really should have 12 alliances at minimum total. If you're really organized, then you could make 2 additional shells in the beginning. even if whether you split attention between all 12 of those additional shells, or you make them and you're giving primary focus on one and then secondary focus on the backups, but they're just made and ready so you have them in time. There's other ways to actually go about doing this as well, but I can't give away all my secrets just yet. The purpose of this is so that way these shells can be used for a few reasons. One, and probably arguably the most important, because it factors into kingdom health, activity, and retention overall, is you use them for migration assets. Meaning, see what I did there? You use them as a way to present your kingdom as a good recruiting grounds. Meaning that it's more valuable when you're recruiting groups or players when you have developed shells. Why? Because most of the time in kingdoms, on average, you are already using and filling up the current active shells. There's also no guarantee that if other shells become less active, you will actually be able to get a hold of those, meaning that you'll be able to get leadership of those shells for a couple reasons. Who knows how the kingdom's turning out? Maybe those alliance shells that have been developed are being led by people that just don't like you or just don't like the kingdom, or they just don't want to give away R5, right? So you don't want to rely on others as much when you're in those situations where it's 50-50 on whether or not they're going to really support the kingdom, or depending on how situations and circumstances have come to where they are, where you just would be expecting in an unrealistic way that these players are going to transfer leader to you, right? You kind of want to make your own luck in this way, invest in yourself. And then if everything pans out with others, fantastic. That's more icing on the cake. But really, you want to build your own cake yourself first and foremost. So that's why you invest on your own. You create and you develop these shells, and you can use them to say, trust me when I say, you can get groups. If your kingdom is competent, if you're unified, if you have good structure, if you have good activity, if you have a decent KvK record or even a winning record, as long as you have those things, and we'll probably touch on that in another video, as long as you have a developed shell that's arguably more developed, has territory that's developed as well, that's the other key part, right, that we didn't mention early on, but you want to try and develop the territory, and you want to carve out territory in Zone 1, in Zone 2, right, potentially Zone 3, just depending on how many alliances you're allowing there. But you want to try and have the shell already prepped, not only internally, but externally, as far as on flagging and potential structures and the amount of member capacity as well. Because that is more lucrative to a migrating group than if you don't have those things set up. So that's your bare minimum, right? You develop tech, you develop the storehouse, and load the storehouse, and then you flag and you try and allow for that shell to have structures, right? And that's really how you plan, right? You want to flag for member capacity increase and to have some structures that are available to it, and then obviously as deep of access that you can give. Minimum is probably Zone 1, Zone 2, but if you can squeeze some Zone 3 here and there, right, that's always a benefit. This is usually how you want to go about properly investing and developing early on in your kingdom, so that way you can be more, I don't want to say feasible, but you can be more sought after by those that are looking for a new kingdom to migrate to. That's one of the reasons why you would develop shells. The number two reason is that you're going to use these shells also mainly in KvK, whether it's for fort drops, if it's for skill usages, right? Those are probably two of the more important and impactful ones. Maybe you need some additional shells if you plan to use some territory on them, maybe to do some additional rallies here and there. Maybe you use it for something else, right? Those are kind of the 2 to 3 most used and common things that I'm aware of. However, if there are more that I am missing, I would love to know those. So please post those in the comments below. And that's really it, right? There's a lot of uses for it, and I can't tell you how many kingdoms I see that don't invest early, where they make this an easier part, right? This is the thing. This is a long-term goal you have to invest in, right? This isn't something that's just going to be kind of a wonder overnight, right? You really have to plan these things out ahead of time, where you're investing months and sometimes a year down the road for what could happen if everything goes well in your kingdom. And these are good things to think about when you are going into a kingdom. It's not just thinking about what's happening today or what's going to happen tomorrow. You gotta really kind of get your Bobby Fischer, your Magnus Carlsen out, and you got to think 20, 30 moves ahead. So with that in mind, and then I guess if I leave you with a pro tip here, so if you're still here at the end, you're going to get a pro tip. The pro tip is you need to put someone, preferably one person, is my recommendation, so you have a single point of contact. Have one person be in charge of organizing all of that information. You get a spreadsheet out and you list out the alliance name, the tag, whose alt is in there, what that person's Discord name is, and then you audit those shells, once every few weeks, once a month, right? And you check in on what's the alliance level, what's their territory, how many tech points do they have invested over from the total amount of tech, right? These are things, right? What's the current storehouse capacity at? What are the skill levels at? These are important things, right? What zones do they have access to? These are important things to do when you are looking to then go out and use these assets, these resources, as recruiting leverage. Because then you'll have all the information readily available to you, which will make your recruiting efforts that much more easier to do. You'll come across more professional and more well organized. When I run kingdoms, this is what I do. And I cannot tell you how much positive feedback I get from people, players, small groups and large groups that I've recruited to kingdoms, that I've done recruiting for, when they tell me, man, you're really well put together, you're really on top of your stuff, this seems like a really well-ran kingdom. First impressions are very important. So that's why these things are tied into a lot. It's not just, hey, we're going to make shells to make shells. We're going to use these as, again, recruiting assets and efforts, to where when people look at that, they say to themselves, wow, this kingdom's just doing things in a lot of the right ways. So again, those are the two most important things, right, is that you're using the shells for recruiting purposes and KvK purposes. And obviously, I'd love to hear from you, right? If you're in a kingdom that you think does this well, I would love to hear your thoughts, right? Have you seen good impacts on how they factor into your recruiting efforts as a kingdom for a whole? Have you seen good impacts on how you're able to use these shells for KvK, right? What are all the ways that you use them in your kingdom for KvK purposes? Do you invest early and try and divide territory up? Have you noticed by doing these things, what are the pros and cons of that? What benefits have you seen? I'd really love to hear anything and everything from those of you that you feel are doing a good job at this and how it has impacted your kingdom and your efforts overall. That is officially now going to be it for me. As always, I hope you enjoy. That's it for me. As always, until next time, I'll catch you later.